Hello, I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Welcome to Inside Politics here on AnewZ. Today we turn our focus to the growing and strategic relationship between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan following the recent visit of Kazakhstan's Prime Minister Oljas Bektenov to Baku. This landmark visit brings into sharp focus the deepening ties between the two key nations in Central Asia and the South Caucasus regions. But the implications of this visit extend far beyond the bilateral ties between these nations. Important to examine the broader picture, including how this visit fits into the changing geopolitical landscape, particularly in the wake of the recent thaw the relations between Russia and the United States. The normalization between these two global powers is having a significant ripple effect throughout the region, and Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan are positioned as crucial players in these evolving narratives. What is the potential impact on trade, security and energy cooperation, especially in the context of the Caspian Sea region? Joining us to discuss these pivotal developments are two distinguished guests. First, we welcome Natalia Pomozova, professor at the Russian State University for the Humanities and an expert in Russia's foreign policy in the region. Also with us is Richard Spooner, a member of the advisory board at the Caspian Policy Center in Washington, D.C., who is joining us today from Astana, Kazakhstan. Dear experts, warm welcome to Inside Politics.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
So, Natalia, let's dive into the broader geopolitical shifts. As we know, the normalization of relations between the United States and Russia has become a significant topic in global politics, especially in the context of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. With talks between the US and Russia over Ukraine taking central stage, what do you believe are the potential implications for countries in our region?
I think that countries of your region are very important. So our relations with Central Asia and with Azerbaijan as well depend on our relations with us and on the Ukraine crisis. So we have these relations, we consider them a part.
Indeed. Richard, continuing on the subject of security, how do you think a shift in the US-Russia relationship might affect the role that Russia plays in Central Asia, especially with regard to the security agreements it has with Kazakhstan and the broader collective security treaty organization?
Well, I think the normalization of Russian-American relations will have a big impact on everything in Central Asia. I assume that security agreements will be honored by all parties, but the geopolitical situation changes when Washington and Moscow are working together. That's something that we haven't seen in a long time. That's new. It has created concerns, of course, in Europe and, of course, in the United States as well. If you look at the reaction in the United States to President Zelensky's recent visit to Washington. So I think that this change in relations has a very large impact on Central Asia.
Natalia, more in details about the security concerns, especially to the member states of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. What are your expectations from the possible rapprochement between United States and Russia?
Well, it's difficult to judge now because we in Russia consider these steps taken by the President of the United States and our President Putin very important. But a lot of experts don't believe that the main focus of Donald Trump is really about the crisis. Yeah, it's like that. But I think, as I'm an expert in Chinese foreign policy, and I know that Donald Trump is very considered a lot about the policy towards China. So I think that now he is preoccupied about this conflict in Ukraine. But when the normalization is in Ukraine will take, then his politics will be focused more on China. And I think that these steps are also were also taken by him to weaken China somehow, because we see that China and Russia, we are more close these days, especially after 2022, and I think that these steps are made by Donald Trump to China as well.
Richard, do you expect United States of America to decide have more, let's say, close relations with Russia in order to diminish the influence and power China has over the Central Asia and its potential presence in the Caspian region?
I'm not sure that the United States plans to play a central role in Central Asia. Normalization of relations with Russia is about other things. It's what the administration is focused on now is a settlement of the war in Ukraine. I think that's the main focus. Now, I agree with what Natalia said about Donald Trump later focusing on China. I think that's true. And I think the normalization puts Russia in an interesting position.
Richard, I do agree
because it has
that
had a weak relationship with America.
Richard, as for now, indeed, the priority, it's a resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and that's among the number one issues Donald Trump is being actively involved. But let's imagine the conflict is solved and the next step Donald Trump may decide to have in the region of Central Asia. Do you still believe that it's not among the top priorities for the American president? I mean, the region itself.
Well, I think the region itself is very far away from the United States.
But very close to China, I'm sorry.
But very close to China. My personal opinion that literally weakening China is unlikely. I think that China's position is very strong. As I said, what's interesting to me is a change in the relationship between America and Russia and how that influences Russia's position between China and the United States.
Probably, Natalia, you can answer the question raised by Richard here.
Between China and the United States, you mean in the region, in the Central Asia?
It could be among the top priorities, as both Russia and China
yes.
are very much involved in the issues related to Central Asia.
That's true, that's true. I mean that for Russia, Central Asia is really extremely important because of many, many reasons, because of economy, because of labor power, so to say, yeah, but, because also of security. So we will do our best to keep our influence in the Central Asia, though it's becoming more tough because the influence of China is really great. So last years, and it's really growing in China, in Central Asia. And what I think about that, we have to improve the credibility of people who are living in Central Asia, ability in Russia. I think that our big problem is lack of credibility, not only in Central Asia, also in other regions. It is a big problem of economy nowadays, and of Russian economy as well.
Natalia, one more question. Let's discuss the economic side of this dynamic, as both Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan have strong ties to Russia. How might the US-Russia tow affect energy cooperation, particularly in the Caspian region? Could this lead to more Western investments in the region, or will Russia retain its influence?
Well, we'll see. It's difficult to judge right now, but I'm sure that Russia will do its best to keep its influence in the region, because it is a strategic region for Russia. Being after the collapse of Soviet Union, it's a strategic region for Russia. So, but we can also some more investments of Western powers in the region, I think.
Richard, to follow up on this discussion from your vantage point in Kazakhstan, how do you think Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan are likely to respond to these changes in the US-Russia relationship? Will they continue to balance their ties with both Moscow and Washington, or is there an emerging shift in their foreign policy strategies?
Well, I think they want to maintain a good relationship with both. Of course, it's a different situation when when Russia and America are acting together in a lot of areas. That's brand new. That's something that everyone will have to get used to. I think in terms of energy, one key thing is the middle corridor, and investment has been taking place there. And in particular, that's an area where Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan have done a lot of important cooperation and continue to do that. And there were issues along that line that were discussed today when the Kazakh Prime Minister visited Baku to increase connectivity, the railroad systems, fiber optics, communication cables, a growth in the shipment of freight between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. I think that the two countries have become closer over the last few years, and I believe that will continue.
Richard, indeed, during Kazakhstan's Prime Minister visit to Baku, to Azerbaijan, the sides also discussed about the middle corridor and the Zangezur corridor, where I would say it was a central topics among two sides to discuss in details. Could you explain the strategic importance of these corridors from the global perspectives and how they fit into the broader geopolitical and economic landscape of the region?
Well, the corridor, of course, is a contentious issue. It's very important to Azerbaijan, and it's important to Turkey. But there are countries that are against it. For instance, Iran is very strongly against it. I have to admit, I'm not exactly sure of Moscow's stated position on that corridor. And of course, in Armenia, political attitudes are changing right now. But it's going to be a difficult issue to resolve, given that Iran is so strongly against it.
Well, Natalia, from your perspectives, how do you see the middle corridor evolving as a critical trade route linking China, Central Asia, and Europe? What is the stand of Moscow on that?
Well, I'm an expert on this. I wanted to make a small remark on Russia and their latest relationships. I think that this accident with the plane had a very bad influence on our relations, and I would like to pay the attention to the effect of stability. The most important now in our relations is proof these states of credibility.
It's about the bilateral relations, and the middle corridor has its own importance, not only for our two regions, but for China and the European Union. Therefore, from the global perspective, do you think that Moscow can be interested in supporting of such an initiative which will bypass Moscow but still be relevant for the countries in Central Asia and China?
I think that potentially, yes, Moscow can be interested in it.
Well, Richard, more in details about the United States and European Union in Central Asia's economic and political matters. How do you think the shifting dynamics between the US and Russia will impact the region's stability and its integration into the global economy?
Well, I'm not sure that it would affect its stability so much. I think that America has made a lot of direct foreign investment in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia. Politically, of course, America has been less involved in Central Asia than, say, Russia or China. So I feel like it's something that we're all going to have to keep our eye on. The change in relations between Moscow and Washington, while not exactly unexpected, since I think we could expect that from Donald Trump based on his campaign, we'll see actually how it plays out, because it's going to involve a lot of changes, and in particularly, of course, first and foremost for the European Union, because they now feel like their alliance with the United States of the last many decades is now shaky.
Richard, but still, you previously mentioned that the Caspian Sea is obviously bordered by 5 countries, and the relations of every single country with the United States and European Union is quite different. Therefore, each country has its own strategic interests, and the global powers have their own. How do you see the dynamics in the Caspian region changing, especially with the growing influence of global powers, such as China, Russia, and the United States?
Well, I think it's an interesting issue about whether Moscow would be supportive of the Middle Corridor. My perception has been over the last 3 years that Moscow was not in favor of the Middle Corridor because it involved less transportation going through Russian territory. In the West, it's viewed really as an alternative to shipping things from China to Europe via Russian territory. So we'll have to see if Moscow's attitude becomes positive toward the Middle Corridor. It is an important route, although still the closest route and the quickest route from China to Europe is through Russian territory.
Well, and Natalia, my last question to you. The situation, the global changes, we do observe the possible rapprochement between the United States and Russia, but still it will take time. And we do see how within the last couple of years, Moscow is paying more attention to development of regional cooperation, the partnership with China, with the Caspian Sea states, with the Central Asia. So if we just don't pay attention to what's happening between Moscow and Washington at the moment, do you still expect Moscow to keep priority over the fostering cooperation with the regional countries in the region itself?
I'm sure that Moscow will keep priority to cooperation with regional countries, because this cooperation and importance of this cooperation doesn't depend on the relations with the United States. We understand very well in Russia that our relations with the United States are very, very complicated. And now we have some positive impulses, and we are happy about it. But I think that we will keep reapproaching with our partners in Central Asia, in the region, with Azerbaijan and as well. So the positive signals don't mean that we turn off China, for example, and that we change our strategy. I mean, so foreign policy strategy. I don't expect the change of policy.
Well, dear expert, thank you so much for joining our program today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind, today with us we had Natalia Pomozova, professor at the Russian State University for the Humanities and an expert in Russia's foreign policy in the region. Also with us we had Richard Spooner, a member of the advisory board at the Caspian Policy Center based in Washington, D.C. Dear viewers, do stay with AnewZ and see you soon.